All right, in tree identification number 12, we're going to look at 5 more tree species in Georgia. We'll see the Allegheny Chinkapin, Basswood, black birch, Catalpa, and Sourwood. We'll start off with Allegheny Chinkapin. As we look at the leaf, of course this is the whole branch right here, but we'll focus on the leaf to start with. When you look at the leaf, roughly 3 to 6 inches in length and 1.5 to 2 inches wide. You'll see a fine tip at each serration that kind of makes it look like a sawtooth oak. But that's more of a point or a tip, whereas the sawtooth oak has more of a hair on that serration. So one way to differentiate it. Now the scientific name for Allegheny Chinkapin is Castanea pumila, and when looking at some other characteristics, we can see that the margins are coarsely toothed, like we just talked about. The fruit is enclosed in a tiny burr with spikes, almost like a chestnut or something of that matter. But then you can look at the stems and you've got these small buds, and that's important when comparing it to any of the oaks if you were to get this confused with some of the oaks. Now the Allegheny Chinkapin is also in the same family and genus as the American chestnut. And that's significant because this can also be susceptible to the chestnut blight that wiped out the American chestnut. So Allegheny Chinkapin. Next up, we have the basswood. All right, as we look at basswood, we can see the leaves are starting to kind of go out because of fall and kind of turn and look a little rough, so I'll just pull an individual leaf that's very representative of the basswood. Scientific name, Tilia speciosa. We're not going to get too species specifics because there are several different types of or species of basswood, but we can see the leaves are 3 to 5 inches long and 2 to 4 inches in width. One of the big features of the leaf is that it's heart-shaped, but if you'll look at the bottom, it's got this uneven base in most cases, where the base is a little bit lower on this side than it is the other. Okay, they're going to be smooth on top and even whitish on the underside of the leaf. When looking at the fruit, it's going to be a rounded pod, almost looking like a berry, 1 to 2 seeded, and the fruit is attached in clusters to the narrow leafy flower bract. So as a whole, the leaves look very similar to a red mulberry. But if you'll remember, red mulberry a lot of the times has lobes, whereas the basswood does not. So this is basswood, Tilia speciosa. Third is the black birch. Okay. Pull this leaf off here at the tip. The black birch is known as Birch-Betula lenta. Okay, and another common name for the black birch is also called sweet birch. Okay, so the black birch has leaves that are 2.5 to 6 inches long and 1.5 to 3 inches wide. The leaf shape is oval to oblong in shape. And it's going to have a finely serrated margin. As you can see the edge there, those leaf margin has a lot of teeth or serrations to it. Okay. When looking at the bark of the black birch, it has a cherry-like appearance to it. So these stems and twigs look a lot like cherry, where you have those little brown spots, but it is not papery. And a big feature of the black birch, if you get to hold a limb or you're trying to figure it out, is if you'll snap that limb and smell it, it smells like has a wintergreen odor. It smells like wintergreen. And even if you taste it, it tastes a little like wintergreen. Now the black birch, Betula lenta, is confined to the mountains of Georgia. And another neat feature when you get on down on the twig, you'll notice that these leaves branch out in twos. And some people even refer to this as armadillo ears. So throw up that peace sign you can see right there. These leaves branching out in twos from that bud. And they'll refer to that as looking like armadillo ears. So that's the black birch. All right, and then fourth we have Catalpa. Scientific name, Catalpa bignoniodes. Okay, the big thing about Catalpa is it's got that pretty large heart-shaped leaves. They can be anywhere from 4 to 6 inches in length, 4 to 12 inches in length. So you can see the different leaf sizes here on this Catalpa. Some small, some large, but denoted by that pretty large leaf on most of the twig. So the leaves also will leaf in whorls, so it will on the stem leaf around, especially at the end. So this really kind of helps you tell it apart at a distance maybe from something like Paulownia that has a similar leaf shape, but also this leaves in whorls. Okay, so you can see the nice heart shape on these. The fruit of Catalpa is going to be a cylindrical pod, or like a bean pod, that will hang down, and it'll be anywhere 10 to 12 inches long, and it contains these small winged seeds. In the spring, you'll see this bloom white. And another little interesting fact of the Catalpa is that you will have catalpa worms that will defoliate this whole tree. So you might see it leaf out and look real nice, and then the catalpa worms will come and hit this and defoliate the whole thing. It won't kill the tree, but it'll basically take all the leaves off to where you might think it's dead. So that is Catalpa. Fifth and last, we have Sourwood. The scientific name for the sourwood is Oxydendrun arboreum, and the leaves are anywhere from 5 to 7 inches in length and 1.5 to 2.5 inches wide. It's an oblong leaf shape, pointed at the end. It's going to have a very smooth texture, and it's going to have these small white hanging blooms when it flowers. The leaves and bark have a sour taste, so that's where it gets its name, sourwood. Now, if you will look on the underside of the leaf, and maybe the camera will pick this up, but you see these hairs up and down the main vein. So if you look real close, another instance like we've mentioned before in some of these videos is it's good to have a hand lens to look and see these hairs. But you'll have hairs on that main midrib or that main vein up and down the underside of the leaf. Okay. This is also a tree where when you look at the twig, you can see the difference between the new growth and the old growth on sourwood. The new growth right here is green, whereas the old growth is more brown and woody. Okay, so that's sourwood, Oxydendrun arboretum. So let's review these real quick, see if you remember them. Follow along, see if you can guess them before I tell you what they are. Okay, we have this leaf. We saw those fine points. This looks like the sawtooth oak, but it is not. Okay, but those fine points, a pretty long, oblong leaf coming to a point. This is Allegheny Chinkapin, or Castanea pumila. Up next, we looked at this leaf. Remember, it had that, it looks very similar to mulberry, but it had that oblong leaf, that uneven base to it. with serrations and kind of heart-shaped, but this is basswood. Okay, then we looked at this leaf, this stem. Okay, remember it had that oblong leaf shapes. Again, we had that ID characteristic of the armadillo ears sticking out at some of the older growth where the two leaves at one bud. Remember the distinct feature, you break that bark, smell it, smells like wintergreen, you know that it is black birch, Betula lenta. We saw this tree sample, pretty significant, pretty large leaf there, heart-shaped, leaves in whorls around the stem, okay, and has that bean pod that hangs down at certain times of the year, blooms white. That is Catalpa, Catalpa bignoniodes. And lastly, we saw this specimen, okay, remember that leaf shape, green growth there, okay, bark is sour to the taste, okay, Sourwood. And that's the tree identifications for ID number 12.